It didn't begin with panic. It began with perfection. July 2nd, 1955, was one of those summer mornings so clear it felt unreal. Sky like polished glass, air still in blue, everything calm. That morning, Pan Am Flight 914 lifted off from New York City, bound for Miami, Florida. A routine flight, a simple hop, the kind thousands of passengers take without a second thought. On board were 57 passengers and 4 crew members, mothers with children, businessmen reviewing notes, a couple on their anniversary trip. The Douglas DC-4 was sturdy, proven, and the takeoff was smooth. No alarms, no turbulence. The first 30 minutes were textbook, coasting over the Atlantic coastline. It was all so ordinary, until suddenly, it wasn't. Without warning, the plane vanished, just like that. One moment it was a dot on the radar, the next it was gone. No mayday, no warning, no explosion, just silence. It didn't crash, it didn't divert. It simply disappeared from the sky like a candle blown out. Search teams were scrambled. Coast Guard vessels combed the shoreline. Helicopters scanned the ocean for hours, then days. Not a single piece of wreckage, no floating debris, no signals from the black box. It was as if the plane had been erased. Radar technicians rechecked the logs. Investigators interviewed air traffic controllers. But every lead led nowhere. The families, desperate for answers, got none. Obituaries were printed. Wills were executed. Life slowly moved on. But this disappearance didn't feel like the others. There was something eerier about it. Clean, sharp, absolute. People whispered theories, a hijacking, a secret crash covered up by the government, the Bermuda Triangle reaching further than expected. Some even muttered abduction, but without evidence, it all dissolved into background noise. Just another strange story, until something happened decades later that changed everything. Fast forward to March 9th, 1992. It was a hot, heavy day in Caracas, Venezuela, the kind where the sun clings to every surface and even the air feels slow. At Simón Bolívar International Airport, the control tower staff began their shift expecting nothing unusual. Commercial flights buzzed through the sky, radios crackled with familiar codes, and the rhythm of arrivals and departures lulled everyone into routine. But at 11:45 a.m., a signal appeared on the radar that changed everything. A large aircraft, completely unannounced, was entering Venezuelan airspace from the north. That alone wasn't cause for alarm. Unknown aircraft occasionally showed up, usually military or chartered flights off course. But when they tried to make radio contact, something strange happened. The voice that responded didn't sound threatening. It sounded confused. A male pilot speaking fluent English with a mid-century American accent asked, slowly and carefully, "Where are we?" The controller, perplexed, replied, "You're approaching Caracas." There was a long pause. The pilot came back on the radio, this time with a voice trembling with disbelief. "This is Pan Am Flight 914. We departed from New York to Miami, July 2nd, 1955. That stopped everything. At first, the controller assumed it was interference or a joke, maybe a pirate frequency. But as the plane approached visual range, their skepticism dissolved. Through binoculars, they saw a Douglas DC-4, the kind phased out decades ago. Its exterior was clean, its engines perfectly intact. The windows gleamed, no aging, no wear. And then something even stranger. The passengers, visible through the tiny windows, looked like they were dressed for a different time entirely. Wide hats, short ties, suits, skirts, nothing modern. It was like staring into a time capsule. When the tower asked for flight confirmation again, the pilot didn't hesitate. Pan Am 914, the same doomed flight, the same people. And despite their obvious confusion, They requested permission to land. The runway was cleared. The wheels touched down. The plane coasted gently as if it had never left 1955. The tower and ground crew rushed to respond, shocked but desperate to make contact. Emergency vehicles moved into position, but before they could reach the aircraft, everything shifted. Over the radio, the pilot's voice returned, this time filled with panic. "No! Stay away!" he shouted urgently, his voice cracked with fear. Then the engines flared back to life. The crew on the ground froze as the DC-4, seemingly unharmed and perfectly functional, began moving on its own. It turned from the gate, pivoted on the tarmac, and without waiting for clearance, throttled forward. It accelerated fast, too fast, climbing into the sky as though trying to escape. The air traffic control team tracked it on radar for only a few moments before, just like in 1955, it disappeared midair. No crash, no signal, no trace. Once again, the plane had vanished. But this time, something was left behind. Near the edge of the runway, a member of the ground crew noticed something fluttering in the breeze. A small yellowed object. It was a pocket calendar, torn and crumpled. When they opened it, the date printed inside was clear, July 1955. That lone detail sparked chaos behind the scenes. Interviews were conducted quietly. Air traffic officials were visibly shaken. A few gave short, awkward statements to local press, but the tone changed quickly. Authorities arrived within hours, and shortly after, men from unknown agencies arrived. American, some whispered. They took everything. Radar tapes, voice recordings, logs, even the calendar. The story was shut down almost as soon as it began. No one was allowed to talk. The official explanation? A misidentified cargo flight. But those who were there never forgot what they saw. And though they never spoke publicly again, some of them, years later, admitted off record that what landed on that runway wasn't just a plane. It was a relic, a ghost, something that came from a crack in time and slipped back through before anyone could understand it. The Venezuelan government, faced with something far beyond their understanding, quietly transferred the case to the U.S. Embassy in Caracas. No announcements were made, no statements given, just a hush that fell across official channels. Within 48 hours, men in unmarked black vehicles began arriving at the airport. They wore dark suits, carried no visible badges, and spoke little. Their presence was unsettling, calm, clinical, precise. They interviewed every air traffic controller, every member of the ground crew, even janitors and catering staff. Questions were sharp and cold. What did you see? Did you record anything? Did you speak to anyone outside? By the end of the week, all radar footage had been seized. Every logbook, every audio recording, every scrap of physical evidence, including the strange, crumpled calendar, was taken. The media, which had begun sniffing around, suddenly went quiet. Stories were pulled. Reporters stopped asking questions. It was as if the entire event had been vacuumed out of public reality. But erasure isn't the same as forgetting. Over the years, whispers leaked through the cracks. A retired radar operator in Florida admitted, in a taped interview before his death, that on that same March day in 1992, he briefly tracked an unidentified aircraft over the Gulf. An old signal, almost like an echo. A JFK airport mechanic swore under oath in a workplace dispute that he saw a DC-4 land without clearance one foggy morning, then vanish before anyone reached the tarmac. In 2003, a Venezuelan nurse told her niece, a journalist, that she treated an elderly woman who appeared out of nowhere, dazed and trembling. The woman said she had come from a plane with strange windows. Her clothes were immaculate, but old-fashioned. Her mannerisms belonged to another time. She vanished from the hospital that same night. No name, no trace, nothing. Naturally, the story mutated in the underground. Conspiracy theorists dug in like termites. Some claimed the entire flight had passed through a fold in space-time, a temporal bubble, perhaps triggered by an unknown atmospheric phenomenon. Others believed Flight 914 had been part of a covert military experiment gone catastrophically right. They pointed to the Philadelphia experiment, where U.S. Navy ships allegedly vanished into thin air. What if Flight 914 was a continuation of that same project? Some theorists argued that the plane hadn't flown through time, but had instead become unstuck in it, caught in a loop, skipping like a scratch record, forced to repeat its journey every few decades. Even darker theories emerged, that the passengers had become ghosts trapped between dimensions, that the flight had never truly left 1955, nor fully arrived in 1992. One chilling theory came from an aging physicist who had spent his life studying temporal anomalies. In a barely circulated paper, he claimed time wasn't linear, but spiral. He described moments in history as coiling back toward themselves, creating fragile seams where reality wore thin. According to him, Flight 914 had hit one of those seams, not by design, not through magic, but by sheer tragic accident. It hadn't landed in the present nor crashed in the past. It had fallen through the spiral. And sometimes, just sometimes, it found a way back out again. Today, the event remains completely unacknowledged by any government. No documentation has ever been released to the public. No passenger list confirmed. The names of the crew and travelers remain as lost as the flight itself. Yet despite the silence, the story refuses to die. Workers at Simon Bolivar International Airport still talk in hushed tones about what happened. Some claim that every few years, always in early March, a strange blip appears on the radar. Faint, flickering, gone in seconds. Others say they've heard the unmistakable drone of 4 propellers overhead when no planes are scheduled. One night crew supervisor, long since retired, said he once heard an old radio frequency crackle to life. A voice came through, male, steady, oddly calm. Pan Am 914, requesting landing clearance. The tower was empty. The runways were closed. And yet the voice continued, again and again. Some call it a ghost transmission. Others believe it's a warning. Or maybe, just maybe, it's a cry from a plane that still hasn't found its place in time.